So let's welcome Simon Morton.
So just a quick word. So this thing here, I was obviously filming this lot here, and because the tech spot's all about effects, just before we start, keep an eye on. So this is sort of DJ effects up here. We've got some more funky effects over here, chaos pads, and some other craziness going on over here, which hopefully will work. Right, let's just, are we live? Ooh. Nice. Hello, my cat. Right.
Is that it?
It's been wonderful.
I wasn't particularly surrounded by electronic music at all, but we had a family who kind of appreciated volume
and appreciated classical music, and I would often be woken up by my mother playing classical music and quite loudly through the house on
hi-fi. So I grew up with an appreciation of volume and sort of a stirring of the emotions through the use of music. I think probably my first experience of synth and the electronic world was the soundtrack. It was actually, I think it was and I just remember when Logic X sort of came out and people kind of looked disappointed because they felt like it had gone back more in the direction of but for me it was suddenly this tool where you could really start to get ideas together and get ideas going really quickly. You want to being more experimental with the music. So I started investing in VSTs and other bits and pieces with the software for Logic. And then I kind of created my first 2 projects, mostly whilst travelling for work. So And the fact that it was so versatile, that it was all on signal path, I think for the first time I thought, you know what, this is something that I would like to have as an instrument. And so I went to listen and went and bought the Matrix group. And I was in this really funny position. I really did understand the fundamentals of synth.
God, was it that bad?
Yes. Have you finished?
This is the first heckle, actually.
Yeah.
It's Christmas.
Mathematical term modulus, which means constant or absolute. I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like the opposite of something that can be rearranged. Wait a minute. Isn't a Euro rack the spinning thing that you cut the Eurometer from? What is the deal with all the cables?
We were listening for it.
It can go faster.
Simon, do you remember that one jam when you were in charge of the tempo and you just kept turning it up?
I went at 4,000 BPM. Should we have another go? $400? 1,000?
Okay, so
Okay.
So let's press on with
Text box.
Yeah, let's just move straight on and move
Okay.
quite nicely. Do you want to say anything about, or has anybody got any questions about the set or anything first of all?
What the hell was that?
And where did you get your shirt?
Yeah, it's a Christmas shirt. So yes, I suppose if I can just talk you through the bits and bobs that are on the table. Unless anyone's got any questions straight away on. So what we have here is actually, so this thing here is the Synthstrom Deluge. So pretty much 95% of what you heard came from that machine there, digital machine. That's going into a MX-1. The MX-1, I don't know if you guys have ever seen one of these things, but it's this kind of hybrid between a mixing desk and this is also an effects unit. I might just create a little rhythm quickly, so that probably makes sense.
As well, isn't it?
So it's a sequencer, so it controls modular and MIDI. It's got its own synthesizer, which is FM, subtractive, and it's also it's a sampler, so you've even got a microphone right here you can record into it. And anyone who's come to Modular Cafe will know how much I bang on about this thing, so I'll probably be quite brief. But it's basically the brains of the entire system. You can run all sorts of things, as well as you may have heard a few polyrhythms going on with bass lines in that first one. So there's lots of things you can do which are really hard to do with with most sequences where you're stuck in 16 and and this thing here also syncs up tempo wise. If I haven't broken it, that is. So if I'll just do a quick beat here. Can I do another set? Right, so I was just showing. So this is, as I say, a scatter. So it means you've got effects directly on the unit. This thing's been out for about 6 or 7 years, I think, and got standard stuff like filters. And there's like 8 variations of a filter, flangers, bit crushers. I've got that sense of distortion, and then rolls. So it's very playable. It's playable like an instrument. There's the synth here, the system, wonderful System 1, which goes in here as well, which you heard a bit. But let's talk about effects. So the way this is set up, these guys here are what you find in a DJ booth. And I haven't seen anyone really use these things for creative synth stuff, which is kind of why I'm doing this textbook, because I thought some people may think this is quite interesting, because with modular stuff, it's quite hard to make things move, and these things are a mixture of beat repeats. They've got drum machines in as well, some of them, reverbs, noises, and special effects.
Just abandon that one.
Flangers. They're designed for DJs, and you can see this knob here. We can just about see that knob there, actually. It's also, you can press it in as well, so it's a multi knob, which is quite clever. You don't see it very often. If you've seen the MIDI fighters, they're the same sort of thing. You can twist them and you can push them. Whereas these knobs on the Pioneer stuff, it's like an aftertouch. So the harder you push them, the more the push effect is increased. So it's kind of like with 2 hands, you've effectively got 4 sets of effects. And it's like any other instrument. The way I look at it is like you have to learn it like you learn anything else, because it can sound awful, as you probably heard. Or you can get quite creative with it. And in fact, this one here, it's got 2 sides to it. This side is beat repeats, and then this is a drum machine, which I don't really use, but this is sort of beat repeating stuff and reverse delays. And then this is the more special build-up effects, they call it, and build-down effects, this bottom one here. And you could also switch between having the beat repeats going the effects go from the beat repeats to the effects, or go around the effects into the beat repeats. So it's quite creative. You might just about see me muck around with that as well at some point.
Yeah, I noticed you were taking the delay out of one and then chopping that up.
That's right, yeah.
In 16ths as well.
That's more luck and judgment, yeah. But yeah, you can do that. You can swap it either way. So that's something I'm not seeing again in VSTs, or at least I haven't seen it. And then this bottom one here, this is actually a sampler as well. So if you haven't got any samplers in your rigs, these are quite cool. You can put your own samples in, but primarily this is a beat repeat thing. So if I just fire something up again. So this is also detected the beat. So you can straight away hear that's a DJ type effect. But the way I write music these days, all of it's live. I just literally go into the studio for an hour, create some loops, press record, jam, stop record and delete. Delete everything. So you're forced to kind of do it live, just like a busker. Maybe I should get some little cymbals for my legs. What else is on here? So yes, that's beat repeats. There's also, I don't know if you can see, there's 3 knobs as well there, and like similar sort of thing. So that's quite clever. What's that? That is basically picking the middle of the EQ and just repeating that. And likewise, I can, because there's bass, mid, and highs. You do the same with the kick. And that goes 2 ways. You can either, or you can cut the middle. And there's a get out of jail free button on these things as well. So if you really make a mess of it, which you've probably heard earlier on, there's this button on the side where you can, I'll set it to backspin. Shabba. So again, it's meant for DJs, someone in a booth who's just mucking about. But when you whack all this stuff through, and with something like a Deluge where I'm effectively bringing in parts, taking out parts, sometimes cutting out kick drums, and you can use this for the build-ups and the breakdowns in between. It's a very cool piece. They're both very cool pieces of kit. This is also a very cool piece of kit. This is a VT-3, a Roland VT-3. I don't know if anyone's, if you're familiar with the Era stuff. Yeah. It's just a really, really quite cheap and really fun, silly piece of kit. But what I was doing earlier on, I got Ian to record how he likes, Modular Cafe. Just a little bit of sort of fairly random.
Nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Nonsense, yeah. I put it on my phone. The phone goes into this thing, and you can start mucking around with it. So let me see if I can get this. Let's see if I can get this all back up. Hello, hello, hello. Right, hang on. Are you still going? Right, so this is your standard DJ. This is straight through. But also this sort of thing, you can do things like scatter, which is a beat repeat depending on how hard I'm talking. Shut up. Now obviously that's quite cheesy, but on samples, if you don't use it too much, it sounds quite nice. And this as well, I'll switch it up. This also has a pitch shifter, a live pitch shifter, and you can change the format to sound like a singing song. Barry White. I'll get my coat. And again, this one's quite unusual because it's got things like radio type thing, or megaphone. It's got a reverb as well. You can just get rid of that. This is the drive. Anyway, you get the idea. So they are really, really cool. They're quite unusual bits of kit, but I would recommend if you just to muck around, just buy one. There's always something you can do with it. But one of my favourite pieces of kit is this. This is a Korg KaossQuad. And they're a bit weird because they've only got phono outs at the back, so they're kind of like consumer rather than sort of professional gear. But it's effectively, I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Kaoss pads. Yeah, they're really very cool pieces of kit. But this thing here is, I don't know if you, can you see that? I'll zoom in. Look at that.
So it only has 2 buttons, right?
It hasn't got any buttons at the moment. Hold on, let me just wax some light over this. Right, does that help? Oh, look at that. It's absolutely crystal clear. Anyway, what you might be able to see is, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 across the top. Yeah. So you can have a total of 4 effects on your, whatever you're putting through it. Actually, let's whack this back through and we'll demonstrate. Actually, sorry, I'm having it down. So let's just pick, so we've got a looper, for example. So I just stuck the looper button on. So I'm using, there's an X and Y axis on this. So you can probably hear, that's just one effect. There's also a slice and a reverse looper. And there's other stuff on here as well, phasers. We've got a jet effect, for example. But, and this is the reason why you may be thinking, but it's kind of a bit of a hammer to crack a walnut. If you use them in insert mode, as in, you know, you've got your synths, you've got your mixer, then you stick in some effects and they're all in insert. That's not much good. So you always need effects which can balance the wet and dry mix, which this does have. So if I wanted to, let's find a good example. So tape echo. No, let's pick a better. Okay, actually, high pass filter. Okay. So that's completely wet. Everything is going through this effect. I can also just mix. See that? I can actually mix the amount of wet. And that's especially cool for things like pitching. Right, so that's a wet pitcher, which sounds kind of weird. But if I just mix it with the, and add a bit of delay, it's like just adding a little bit of seasoning to something that's going on, particularly with vocal samples. That can sound quite cool because all you're doing is just sprinkling a little lightness. Because these things are aimed at DJs, it's been made really sort of reasonably idiot-proof. I'm not saying DJs are idiot, sorry. No one's a DJ, are they? What I mean is, you don't want to be thinking about the preciseness of every single setting on an effect. You want to go, well, I want some reverb, and I don't want it to ruin everything too much. So you probably saw I was using a lot of reverb just because I like it. It sounds like a dub reverb. And you can switch it on sort of relatively quickly. So now what else have we got on here? Yeah, that's probably about it. Except I just realised I forgot to press record and record the set. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. Right, okay, so there was quite a lot of stuff there. Some people are still awake. So does anyone have any questions?
How do you sync it all together? What's the master on it?
So the master is the Deluge.
Right.
That has got a MIDI out just here. And actually this is a MIDI splitter cable, as much as everyone hates them, I know, but it's just split into the MX-1, and as soon as the MIDI in goes into the MX-1, it creates the MIDI which goes out through USB. MX-1s are the Roland era, are meant for the Roland era bits of kit. And these are attached by USB, and the audio actually from the synth goes into the mixer by USB, as does the VT-3 vocoder shenanigans, as does the TB-3, and if you've got any other bits of Roland gears like the System 8 or well, there's loads of them.
TR8.
TR8, TR8S, TB3s, all of that shenanigans, all the boutiques. You can attach it by USB, which means less. You don't need MIDI cables. You don't need. Sorry, you still need MIDI cables, but you don't need audio cables. Which is really cool because it's just less stuff. Well, you couldn't tell that from looking at this. There's cables everywhere. But I'm sure the burning question is what the hell is that light rig he's got? I apologise if anyone's developed epilepsy during this.
How much is it? Can I get
£17. Yeah, no refunds. Okay, any other questions?
Where did you find, well, how did you discover the Pioneer boxes?
Yeah.
I woke up and I had meat in this ear and pastry in this ear. It was a Pioneer. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I've been waiting all night for that.
Get on
It was one of those sort of eBay type things. I just sort of saw one and thought, well, that's really weird. What on earth is that? And then, usual stuff, quick look on YouTube. And, wow, that's an amazing piece of kit. But it's strange. I mean, we've spoken in Anderton's as well, where the DG? Like the Bee Gees doing DJ. The DJ stuff is kind of over there, and the synth
because
stuff.
we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, there is that, yeah. But I just think there's so many brilliant things, and I did a fairly. My apologies, I didn't have time to rehearse last night, so I was stuck on a train in Edinburgh. Yeah. So it was a bit of a mess, but I hope you get the idea of that these things are kind of really creative, really, really creative, and they're quite instantaneous as well. And I'm into sort of, I used to, like a lot of people, you get obsessed with getting everything perfect, and you never actually finish anything because you spend your time going, it's not finished yet because it needs probably a little bit more tweaking. And I got to the stage where I was spending more time tweaking than actually finishing. But since I've gone live and just record it, it's going to be full of mistakes, but that's kind of what makes it a lot of the time. Not always. Sometimes mistakes are big mistakes, you start again. But if you've got instant sort of gratification from these sorts of DJ things, it just might, someone may go away from today and go, yeah, actually, try it out and inspire someone.
Is there anything that you wish the Pioneer stuff had that it's lacking from your point of view? What would make it more useful?
That's a really good question. No, I can't think of anything other than more of the same.
Does it have MIDI?
No, it doesn't. So I don't know if you can see the flashing lights here. This actually has
Just audio in.
Yeah, well, because I'm sort of a fairly simple person, as you could probably tell. A lot of stuff I do is 4 to the floor, and so this thing is kind of geared to beat detect quite really well. I mean, if I was doing things sophisticated, I think it would really struggle. So, no, it doesn't have MIDI in, but I've never found that problem because there's a tap tempo as well. So if it's struggling, and it's the same with this as well. The Korg has a auto BPM and tap tempo as well. So that's really useful for effects because sometimes you don't actually, if you're doing dubby stuff, for example. If I don't want the delay necessarily on, on the 3/4 or whatever on the quarter. You might want it actually a little bit late, because then it gets that sort of laid back sort of feeling. So you can use a tap tempo just to sort of bugger it up. So they're useful to have on these sort of effects units. I'm just thinking, anything else? Oh yeah, there's a nudge on this as well. So you can actually nudge the tempo as well. Again, to get that the later beat repeats.
Yeah, I've looked at those KaossQuad things for similar kind of things.
Yes.
But there's too many of them to choose from. How do you set them right on? There's KaossQuad, there's Korg, there's like a bunch of varieties. Yeah.
So this thing here, for example, is a Kaoss MIDI.
Yeah.
I actually use this just as a bog standard recorder. Well, I would if I press record, of course, for stuff.
Right.
Which has one effect as well, and it's actually it's pretty good. So that's kind of like the entry level starter.
Yeah.
That's quite a nice piece of kit, and that sort of goes on the end of your sound chain. You've got the red Kaoss.
The red ones.
The red one.
Yeah.
The red KP3, I think that is. That's got a sampler in it. I've got one. It's fairly tricky to use. So mine's gathering dust.
Right.
But they're like all these things. I think sometimes you just have to buy them, try them out, see how you get on.
Kiss a lot of frogs.
What's that?
You've got to kiss a lot of frogs, basically.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Exactly. So it might be right for you. For me, I struggle with it because it's a little bit too complicated for how my brain works, particularly if you're trying to jam and trying to remember where everything is. There's a limit to how many brain cells you can use. But there's also a yellow KaossQuad as well, which I think is more geared to sample mangling.
Yeah.
Like if you've got a collection of samples,
I can
you
never
want to
figure out what they all did. Just
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, the yellow one's more for DJs who've got a couple of loops they want to sort of mash together. The KP3 or KP3 Plus, I think is the one everyone sort of the most popular one. But I think this by far is the best one. This is far more creative and instantaneous.
Which one is that one?
That's the KaossQuad Quad, but they don't make them anymore, so they're like hen's teeth. Yeah, trying to find them is really tricky. That took me a long time to find out. Just the only other effects I don't have in this is you can get things like analog heats. I don't know if you've come across who makes them? Electron? Electron, yeah. And they sound very nice. But they're really expensive, yeah. I just can't quite justify it. But yeah, have you got one?
No, I want one, mate.
I
have a permanent eBay search.
Yeah, I do.
Emails me occasionally.
Yeah.
Tells me they're too expensive.
They're really good. But again, actually, so the MX-1, even though it's a very noisy mixer, it's not brilliant quality, has got a mastering effect on it. So you can actually choose various levels of mastering. Again, if you're like got a pro studio, I would probably say, it's a bit too, it's not quite high enough quality. But if you just want sort of really good mixer that you can kind of do some funky stuff with, and it can master quite nicely, particularly the dancey stuff. It's got quite a good compressor in it. This thing's, I haven't even shown you the beat effects on this. Okay, last thing now, I guess. How you getting on, Pete? He's landed a plane at Heathrow. Let's whack this back on. So the beat effects on this as well. This has got side chaining, but it's programmable side chaining, which is a bit weird. So if I just go, let's do this one here. So you can see this. So this is a so I'll go back to side chaining. You can effectively choose where you want the side chaining to happen as a pattern, which is kind of a bit weird, because normally obviously side chain compression is typically, not always, but typically it's a kick drum which kicks in the compressor and drops the volume of everything, compresses other things. But if you actually you can use compression as a creative thing to try and, yeah. So it's a bit unusual. Again, it's not normal. It's something you can sort of, this has also got send and return. That's also really useful. I forgot about that. So I haven't had time to wire it up, but if you want to say a space echo as a bog standard send and return, this thing does that as well. And it's got a DJ master and headphone select on this thing. So the way DJs work, I don't know, I'm sure most of you are probably familiar, but they will have a mix, but they will want to be able to just pick out, say, the first turntable and hear what's going on. So whilst the crowd are hearing that, they're hearing something else. And this particular mixer has got that as well, which means you can actually select multiple instruments on this mixer whilst you're jamming and hear what's going on, which is, again, another unusual. You hear and select multiple instruments as well.
Prepaid audio listen.
What's that?
Prepaid listen. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Yeah, brilliant. Any other questions? Anything to fire at Simon?
It's,
Cool. I mean, it's an all digital setup.
yeah.
But it's still, I thought it was really great that you've got such a range of ideas and possibilities.
Yeah.
There's stuff that, come and have a look at it and ask any questions.
Yeah.
There's things that easily could integrate into a modular setup or a more analog setup.
Yeah. I mean, So the Deluge in particular, you know, it's just, as soon as you've got CV and gates, then suddenly everything can start talking to each other. And you can also be clever with the clock on the Deluge as well, so you don't have to have your typical clocks that you would have, as far as I understand it, running modular. I'm a bit of a, I shouldn't be, I'm a charlatan, I shouldn't be here. I own 0 pieces of modular.
What you've got there is modular.
Oh good, I'm allowed back in.
And what you like is the, you know, the hands-on, intuitive control, which is what we all like about modular, but also those happy accidents. When you were talking about, you know, all of those sort of breakdowns and stuff.
Yeah.
That's the way I record it, and then chop it up.
Is that how you do? You record live and then...
I actually don't know what I'm doing.
Finally! We've been saying it for a long time, to be honest. No, yeah, so that's your workflow, right? So you...
Yeah, it's exactly what you find, you know, like what you like about that is similar.
And it's really liberating to actually go, actually, that is a mistake, but that's staying in. And it sounds really weird, because, I don't know, computers, you're chasing perfection the whole time, and actually, that's not what it's, well, for me, anyway, it's not what it's about.
It's taking out, sitting there with the mouse, drawing in, you know, the filter, you know, on the modulator, like modulating it, but doing it hands-on.
Yeah.
It takes that away from that process, which is more sort of human, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you know, you listen to like a King Crimson record or something, and they go into these awesome jams, and you can hear a few mistakes in there.
Yeah.
They get in the zone, they leave it.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
I don't know about you, but if you listen to records and there are mistakes in, that's kind of the bits that really stick with you. So I'm all for like, mistakes. Yeah, you probably noticed.
But I mean, the performances as well were great, and they have a really lovely kind of polished feel in terms of in terms of performance and the progression.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that we always struggle with from a modular point of view, is to get dynamic into music. And obviously, you know, you're operating on digital, so you are cheating a little bit. But you know, it's still really cool to kind of hear the dynamic and the builds and the flexibility. And again, that's another thing that the effects stuff adds to it, which is why you use it.
Yeah, yeah.